Hi, my name's Amanda Fossett, and I am in social change class. I'm here with my fiance, Steven. So the reason I have him in my video right now is because my focus for this class on social change has been on disability, and he was born with cerebral palsy, so he's been disabled his whole life. So he has a perspective different than myself or other people. So I'm going to just be going through the ideas that I have that I focused on throughout this class, and he's going to kind of add in some ideas with it as well. We've been together for 4 years, so I've definitely had some positive and negative experiences when it comes to this social movement. So I'm just going to touch on some ideas. So the methods of change are going to be materialistic as well as idealistic. So materialistic is going to be things such as Americans with Disabilities Act require there to be accessibility for everyone. But in addition to that, so not just ramps and buildings, you also have the idealistic movement of that people need to change their ideas about disability, and it's not just about ramps. So, do you have anything to add to that?
With regard to what exactly?
What I just said. So, like, an example that I brought up in one of my assignments was when we were in Boston and we were trying to go to that one Starbucks, and they had a ramp. Like, it was a historical building, but there was trash cans blocking the entire entrance. Like, there wasn't that idealistic view that, hey, I shouldn't put these here because that ramp is here for a reason. It's not just a place to put trash cans. So, like, have you had any experiences, or I'm sure you have, but any experiences in your life where you've, like, there's physical, materialistic accessibility, but that idealistic need isn't there?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's an everyday occurrence, and it's not intentional, and that's where I think a lot of it comes in daily life beyond, like, an older building not being accessible or something. It's a lot of just people not realizing how much space an individual, like either on crutches or who uses a wheelchair, may need to get through or get by, depending on how you want to look at it. So a lot of times it may be even like in an office building, for example, they put a file cabinet like in the hallway or near the copier. Well, that takes up so much space, so you can only you can't get through, or you can only go through like in one direction. You can't. Maybe like you can get like halfway through so you can use what you need within that space, but you can't like continuously egress, so you have to like turn around and go back depending on what you need. So it's just kind of it's an awareness more than anything else that how much space is needed, or that it's not simply something isn't designed simply for one purpose, which gets back to universal design. And I don't know if that's something you've touched on in this class, but
yeah,
designing things for everyone and not just as an accommodation for an individual with a disability.
Yeah. So this class, basically, we've been talking about social change in our society, and my focus this whole semester has been on disability.
Okay.
But yeah, that touches on like the materialistic. So materialistically, that office building is ADA compliant, but the ideas of people not knowing, like, hey, this wouldn't work for someone in a wheelchair. It's that idealistic part of it. So. Okay, so the type of social movement that I focus on is progressive. So despite having these issues in our society, there has been some progressive movement towards that. Like I've mentioned that some famous shows like Breaking Bad had a character with cerebral palsy, and it really showed him in a just real light. Like it showed the struggles of having a disability, how his parents had to deal with it, and it also had the actor also has cerebral palsy in real life. Another show is Speechless, also shows a character who has a disability in real life, and just kind of the trials and tribulations that go along with it. Another example is Target has done a lot to include models of different abilities in their print ads. I know, like in 2015, there was a Halloween ad where there was a little girl on crutches and had braces on her legs, and there's also been like kids with hearing aids and things like that. So have you experienced, like, do you think, you've been alive for 28 years. Have you, like, since you were little, I mean, I know your perspective changes with age, because when you're little, everything is great and
Sure.
easy. But have you think that you've noticed like possibly a change?
I mean, definitely. I think the what you brought up with like TV series and like using actors that have a disability instead of someone that doesn't have a disability, but playing someone that has a disability. I mean, obviously, we've seen more individuals with, different, you know, ability levels and different, struggles that are everyday life, whether it's physical disability or ending up having dementia or whatever, like things that a lot of people are just going to get with age, not necessarily disabilities that people are born with, because I think so much of that is like the focus when it comes to disabilities, like these things that people may be born with or whatever, and not realizing that a certain number of the population at some point is going to be disabled. I think they calculated at some point it's going to be like 60% of the population within a certain time frame, and that could be wrong. But my point being, yes, have we progressed? Yes, and I think we're going in the right direction as far as the visual representation of the different the diversity in the world and in this country when it comes to people in general. However, I think where we still fall short is that and it goes back to the ideological and certain things, and I guess how we view people in general, because I think you know we all look at someone and say, okay, well, if you have like cerebral palsy and like that's put on TV by whether if it's the show Speechless or another show or a different person with a different disability, then we then assume that every person with that disability is the same way, and it's no different than any one of us, just anything else. Like, that doesn't mean that every 28-year-old man or woman is going to act the same way or have the same trials and tribulations. The same thing happens with disability. Like, just because this person has cerebral palsy and that person has cerebral palsy doesn't mean that we are exactly the same, or that our disability has the same physical or mental or emotional impact on us. So that's the difficulty. Like, even though we've progressed, we are still, as a society, struggle because we have to, in essence, basically, unfortunately, I think subconsciously we basically classify people or put them in buckets. So it's, oh, you have this and you have this, so you two must be dealing with the same thing. And the reality is some of it may overlap, but a lot of it isn't going to overlap because it has to do with, other things like upbringing, access to opportunities, the level of impairment, and things of that nature that don't get, taken into account if you're not exposed to it on a much deeper level than, some representation, even if it is realistic. Just like anything else, if you're only looking at one case or one individual, that of course in any situation is not going to be fully encompassing of that demographic, no matter what the demographic is. And I think that therein lies the issue with a lot of things in this country and around the world.
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I think it is progressive, and I've compared it to the LGBT movement or the civil rights movement. And I think the difference is that there wasn't like this revolution when ADA was passed. There really wasn't this like big movement of people being like, you need to be aware of this. And I also think that just accepting someone's sexual orientation or skin color that's different from you might be easier than everyone's disability is different, and you have to get to know that individual, so it's not as easy to just
Sure, and
see
then
them as equal or whatever.
I mean, I can see that, but I think it more comes down to those things in essence. I think when you talk about appearance and physical ability to do something, I think that always going to have something greater than something that doesn't really impact someone's physical ability to accomplish something. So I think that is a lot of it. The other thing is, and I think the bigger thing is the access to things. Like, yes, have we had a civil rights movement and some other movements in this country? Yes. And should people have struggled and should it have been as difficult? No, and unfortunately, we're still dealing with some of that in this country. But that there was not physical. Yeah, there were laws and things to prevent people, but there wasn't physical barriers that literally prevented you. Doesn't mean someone of a certain race wasn't physically able to enter a place. Now, it may have been
Right.
prohibited by law, but physically, if they wanted to get there, they could get there. And so that's the difference now, is that it always seems to come down to, or at least it's portrayed as, for a lot of things, not everything, but for a lot of, it's portrayed as it being a financial thing.
Mm.
And that is where a lot of it comes in, and that's why I think a lot of times things have taken a lot longer. And then the other issue is, unfortunately, there's a lot of individuals with a disability who do not have an auditory voice, so therefore that's one less person, in their opinion, that they feel like that they can help get the word out, the message out.
Right.
Are there ways now with social media and technology? Yes, but it's still not 100% the same, and so that's the biggest thing. And a lot of it also has to do with the fact that getting people into positions of being able to change things. I mean, you're at a point now in history where you have a very diverse government to some extent than we did, decades ago, before, when the civil rights movement was
Yeah.
taking place. Now you have a very diverse ethnically and racially, people in
And
government,
gender.
but in gender, but where you're still very limited people as far as individuals with physical disabilities that are in parts of government or in positions to physically change things themselves. I'm not saying that's an excuse that people should just throw up their arms and say, I don't care, and heck
Right.
with it, but I think that's the biggest hurdle right now. It's very limited of people who have firsthand experience of the situation, or who are directly affected, who are in a position that can fix it,
Right.
or make a direct impact immediately.
And like by financially, you mean like if Joe's Bakery has been there for 50 years, it's not. It would cost them so much money to reconfigure like their building to make it ADA compliant.
Sure, or even like, yeah, so it costs money to change things, and I'm not saying that it's an excuse, because things have been around for 20 years and certain things should, actually, no, it'll almost be
Almost
30
30
years,
years.
so, but yeah, so, it's how long, and it's, and then there's still some, from what I've heard, that it's even some of the newer construction somehow is getting around certain things, so I don't know all the facts, but, when it comes down to it costs this much more, and that seems to be a lot of the justification for things. Not that it's ethically and morally right, but that
Right.
seems to be. And then I know the current administration is currently, there's some discussions about current ADA, so haven't read up on that, but I do know that that's
Right. So the the theory that I have been focusing on is the resource mobility theory, and basically this just means that there's trouble like mobilizing social movement and awareness, and like people don't understand the importance. And I definitely think like a perfect example that I used in one of my writings was when we went to that beer museum, and it was literally the owner's wife. Like they literally had built that business together, and she parked right in front of the ramp, and you couldn't get out of the ramp. And someone who literally has started a business, knew that they had that ramp there for a reason, still parked in front of there. Like there's still not that awareness.
I mean, it's definitely an awareness thing, but it's also, I think the biggest thing is, like, it's a convenience thing from then. I know this probably sounds bad, but it seems like, well, I'm only running in for 5 minutes, so what are the odds that a person who actually, like, needs that spot in order to successfully, enter the business, so they can get out of their car and enter the business without, banging into someone else's car or whatever, because that's the biggest thing. Everyone always thinks it's close, and yeah, is being close nice? Sure, and for some people it might be necessary, but for me and a lot of us, it's more just the space to physically get out of our car. So that's the whole thing. Or I was just running inside, and I can see them. So like if somebody pulls up, then I'll move. But
Right.
the thing is, you can't identify someone from sitting in a car if that person has a disability or not, unless they have a sign screaming on the side of their car that I have a disability. Because unless their hang tag is hanging, or you're that good at seeing it, you're not gonna, even if their hang tag's hanging, you're not gonna see it unless you look at every license plate as it drives by. You're not gonna know that that person,
Yeah.
has a disability. And the other thing is, there's limited enforcement in this country just due to resources on, like, the people that have parking placards, people that are using them now. That's not to say that certain things aren't being done. I do know, like, larger events, they have police there that are actually checking like the placard matches the person in the vehicle. So we are moving forward. It's taking a
Yeah.
lot longer than it should.
And also, like, there's a different perspective when it's, the grandma next door who has bad knees, who uses the placard. Sometimes she'll park crooked and not realize that that extra space is there for
Sure.
someone. Not saying that she's not worthy of needing that. She definitely needs that distance or that extra space to get out with her cane or whatever. But it's even the people that use the resources implied by ADA still struggle to have that awareness because it's lacking in our society. There's no one, yes, we're starting to see more characters on big TV shows, but it's, you don't, like you said, in the government, you don't see it. You don't,
But
people aren't, the problem
But
isn't always
with a
there.
lot of things in our society, it doesn't matter what it is. A lot of it is out of sight, out of mind. And I think it's just in certain things because you live with me every day, and so
Right,
therefore
yeah,
you live with it. I
yeah.
think it's magnified for you, and so there's that to be said too. But it's kind of out of sight, out of mind until you see someone who goes and tries to get in their car and needs to open up the door fully or needs the space to turn their chair sideways or to put the chair together because it's in their back seat, whatever it may be. Until you see that, people just don't they don't, doesn't, it just isn't a thought in their mind. I don't think it's
Right.
intentional. It's
Oh,
just,
I know it's not intentional. It's like when I'm around people who aren't affected by disability, and they see how infuriated I get. Like when people just park in handicap spots and they don't have that
sure,
thing, or they, like clearly they're using their mom's
sure,
placard. Like it infuriates me, and people don't understand the significance of
sure,
just that little thing. It's so frustrating, but in our society, we have no one actually. We do know what's right and wrong, but there's no really like saying, look, like here are these people that actually need this. And there's that lack of, like this theory is so true. We're having trouble mobilizing people to really understand and have that awareness, even on just an everyday basis, just going to the grocery store, doing the right thing.
sure.
You know what I mean? So the change strategy to implement this change in our society, I focused on the re-education strategy, which we kind of talked about just re-educating people moving forward, hopefully in our future. There will be more re-educating. I mean, I can think about my mom who is in Generation X, yeah, Gen X. And she said that when she was in school, she never saw a kid in a wheelchair, or they were always like hidden away. Like even if they weren't
Sure,
special education kids, even kids that were obviously intelligent like you that could be in regular classes just had a physical disability,
sure.
she never even saw them. So now when I'm in school and I see kids in wheelchairs in normal school, and I mean, so I definitely think that there's a re-education. There's more, that generation and my grandparents' generation, like the baby boomers, it's not even on their mind. It wasn't even introduced to them. I mean, you think about back in the 50s and 60s, a lot of these people were put in institutions.
Sure.
And yet nobody even knows how terrible that was. And it's just something that is now coming up and now has to be
Sure. I mean, I
re-educated.
think I don't disagree with you. I think the struggle then still comes back to how do you get that information out there? How do you make people get it, especially people that aren't currently in school? But the other thing is, just with anything else, there's still only so much funding to go around and different causes and different things to address. And so it's where do the resources come from to do
Mhm.
that? Because people still only have, it's not that people don't care, it's just that, you know, people still don't have so much money, like whether it's a company, an individual, like there's still only so many resources to allocate out. So it's
Right.
how do you justify what goes where? And so that becomes the bigger thing.
Hmm.
And so I think we're still moving in the right direction, but I'm not sure you're gonna see any like major leaps and bounds until the current, I guess, really our parents' generation. So the current people in their 50s, 60s, maybe 70s, when they start getting a little bit older and some of them start retiring, and you're starting to see some of it already, but their bodies start wearing down and they now need crutches or a walker or something else, a cane to help stabilize them, and they can't walk as far or whatever. when that generation, because it is such a large generation, the baby boomer generation, that they, when there's so many of them that then need these resources and these extra, these things that, you know, to make things easier, like a ramp to get in or whatever, things to make access easier. When they start having to use the things that have been put in place,
Right.
then we may see a change just because of the sheer volume of voices that it's now affecting.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, that's the biggest thing to change is when enough people get together and say, this is affecting me. But the bottom line is nothing in this country has ever fully changed until enough people are directly affected by it where they feel the need to get together and power by numbers and do something. And it all comes down, it all unfortunately goes back to power by numbers and then financial. So
Yeah.
when these people then control votes and they control, investments and have access to these things that directly affect other people, when that starts to impact them, then we'll see change. But until it directly impacts other people, it is going to be a slower change.
Right.
When those things happen, then things will speed up.
I mean, something we talked about in this class was the shooting at the Florida high school. I mean, it was just how many times do you have to have this issue of gun control until something is done? And so I just think the re-education strategy.
Well, I mean, a lot of it is too. I mean, everyone fears change as a culture, so that is part of it. Whether it's especially with disability, like that's still in it. People fear change, so you have that. Just like the shooting, it's people fearing change and things getting, in essence, taken away or infringed upon. That's the way it looks, because that's where your gun control, you're getting Second Amendment, but you can get into that debate. But
Right.
That's what it comes down to, and then it also goes back to finances. It's certain people are benefiting, and I'm not saying that that's wrong from the gun manufacturers. So they have other interests in other things, and right, wrong, or different. So there's all these factors that go into being considered why things have or haven't changed, and
Right.
it's when enough people are affected by it and feel the need to make a change, then things will change. But until then, that's basically the catalyst for any big changes. When enough people say enough is enough because they're directly affected. But until then, it's one step at a time
Right.
in any situation.
So yeah, it is, and it's just educating people as much as you can. I mean, I know my mom, since meeting you, she's, I mean, at least my family, like, disability never came up in my childhood or anything. It wasn't until I was, like, in high school where, I was around special needs kids, or there was a kid in a wheelchair at my school that you really were like, oh, I mean, like, you knew they existed, but it really wasn't, like, something that affected your life, or you thought about, or it was like, oh, I need to do this because this person might need that,
Sure.
But then, since you've come into my family, it's like people are more aware of it. It's like there's a re-education.
Sure, but that's my point. It's out of sight, out of mind.
Right, but like you need that re-education, and I'm just hoping that with increasing, people in the media or whether it just be something as small as just a TV show or just a model in an ad, like it really makes an impact. People actually see it and they think about it. Even if it re-educates one person, that's still one more person in society who understands it and
Sure.
might make a change.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, thank you for joining me in my video.
You're welcome.
So that's it. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.